As a person of color, have you or anyone you know ever experienced the triage thing in healthcare, even when the case was critical and it was clear that they should be attended to, but they were never prioritized? Let us know in the comment section. These conversations need to be had. Before we dive right into this interesting story, please support this channel. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more interesting stories. Thank you. The hospital was bustling with its usual controlled chaos. Nurses rushed down hallways with charts, stretchers squeaked under urgent strides, and doctors discussed treatment plans in hushed, serious tones. St. Matthew's Medical Center was renowned as a leading facility, boasting a team of world-class physicians. But like many institutions, it wasn't immune to biases hidden beneath its polished surface. Dr. Eleanor Ellie Bennett, a black woman in her mid-40s, walked through the doors of the hospital that day with a sense of pride. She was the recently appointed chief surgeon, a milestone not just for her career but also for the community she represented. She had worked tirelessly to get here, facing obstacles that would have made many quit. But Ellie wasn't one to back down. However, Ellie had chosen not to introduce herself formally to the entire staff just yet. She wanted to observe the hospital's culture firsthand, to gauge how patients and employees were treated. Today, she dressed simply in business casual attire, leaving her white coat and badge in her office. She planned to sit in on a few consultations and observe the operations of the ER. As Ellie waited in the lounge area, a distressed woman stumbled through the emergency doors. Her name was Brenda, a black woman in her late 30s. She was clutching her chest, clearly in pain, while her husband supported her. Panic was written all over his face as he shouted for help. "Please! My wife can't breathe. Someone help her!" Brenda's husband, Michael, called out, his voice breaking. A nurse quickly arrived with a wheelchair and guided Brenda to a waiting area. Her condition seemed serious, but it was evident she needed to be triaged. A middle-aged white doctor, Dr. Charles Hargrove, approached, clipboard in hand, with a practiced but distant demeanor. "What seems to be the problem?" Hargrove asked, his tone clinical, as he glanced at Brenda without much interest. "She's having severe chest pain and shortness of breath," Michael pleaded. "She needs help now." Dr. Hargrove frowned slightly, flipping through some preliminary notes the nurse had jotted down. Without meeting their eyes, he muttered, "We'll take a look after we've finished with the others. Triage will determine priority." Michael's frustration grew. "What do you mean? My wife can barely breathe." Dr. Hargrove sighed, his irritation barely concealed. "I understand you're worried, but we have a process, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me." "But she's in critical pain," Michael insisted, his voice rising. Brenda, barely able to speak, reached out to him, her face pale. Dr. Hargrove glanced at her and then back at Michael with a look of disdain. "Perhaps you should try one of the community clinics. They might be more suited to your needs." Ellie, who had been quietly observing, stood up, her calm demeanor concealing the fury bubbling inside her. She approached the scene, her presence commanding attention. "Excuse me, Dr. Hargrove," Ellie said evenly. "Are you refusing to treat this woman?" Hargrove turned to her, startled by the interruption. "And who are you?" he asked, his tone sharp. Ellie ignored the question for the moment. "This woman is experiencing symptoms that could indicate a heart attack. You're a doctor. Why aren't you doing your job?" Dr. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Listen, ma'am, this is none of your concern. Let the medical professionals handle this." Ellie's eyes hardened. "Clearly, you're not handling it. I'm asking you again, are you refusing to treat her?" Michael looked at Ellie, confused but hopeful. Brenda's labored breathing filled the tense silence. Dr. Hargrove scoffed. "Look, I don't have time for this. We're short-staffed, and there are other patients waiting. If you'd like to complain, you can take it up with administration." Ellie took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. "You'll regret this." Hargrove waved her off and turned to leave, but just as he did, Ellie pulled out her phone and made a call. Moments later, two senior administrators and the hospital's director walked into the ER, their expressions serious. "Dr. Bennett," one of them said, addressing Ellie directly. "What's going on here?" Dr. Hargrove froze. His eyes darted between Ellie and the administrators. "Dr. Bennett," he repeated, his voice faltering. Ellie crossed her arms, her gaze never leaving Hargrove. "Yes, Dr. Bennett. Chief surgeon of this hospital. And I just witnessed you dismissing a critically ill patient because of your biases. Care to explain yourself?" The room went silent. Nurses and patients looked on, some whispering among themselves. Hargrove's face turned pale as the realization of who Ellie was sank in. I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought." "You thought wrong," Ellie interrupted. "You thought you could judge someone based on how they look, based on your own prejudices. And that almost cost this woman her life." The administrators didn't wait for Hargrove's excuses. One of them turned to the head nurse. "Make sure this patient is seen immediately. And Dr. Hargrove, report to my office once you've handed over your current cases." Hargrove opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. He nodded stiffly and walked away, his shoulders slumped. Ellie knelt beside Brenda, her voice softening. "You're going to be okay. We'll take care of you." Tears welled in Michael's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much." Brenda was quickly taken to a treatment room, where Ellie personally oversaw her care. Tests confirmed that Brenda was indeed experiencing a heart attack, but thanks to Ellie's intervention, she received treatment in time. In the days that followed, Ellie called for a hospital-wide meeting to address the incident. She spoke openly about the importance of treating every patient with dignity and respect, regardless of their background. Hargrove, after a formal review, was suspended and required to undergo mandatory training on implicit bias before he could return to work. The hospital also implemented new policies to ensure that such incidents would not happen again. As for Brenda and Michael, they stayed in touch with Ellie, grateful for her compassion and advocacy. The story of what happened at St. Matthew's Medical Center spread quickly, inspiring conversations about accountability and the importance of diversity in healthcare. Ellie's leadership became a beacon of hope, not just for the hospital but for the entire community. Her actions proved that standing up for what's right could save lives and create lasting change. Months after the incident, the story of Dr. Ellie Bennett and her intervention at St. Matthew's Medical Center had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story, and Ellie found herself being invited to panels and discussions about racial bias and inequality in healthcare. She used the opportunity to push for systemic change, not just in her hospital but across the medical field. Ellie knew that one incident exposed to the world was just the tip of the iceberg. There were countless others that went unnoticed or unresolved. Brenda and Michael became strong advocates in their own right. After Brenda's recovery, they attended one of Ellie's panel discussions. During the Q&A session, Michael stood up to share their story. "My wife could have died that day because someone decided to judge her based on their assumptions. But Dr. Bennett saved her, not just with her medical expertise, but with her courage to stand up for what's right. We owe her more than we can ever repay." The audience gave them a standing ovation, and Ellie smiled, touched by their gratitude but also emboldened to continue her work. At home, Ellie's children, Maya and Jordan, were inspired by their mother's work. Maya, who was 15, decided she wanted to become a doctor like Ellie. Jordan, at 12, started speaking out at school against bullying and unfair treatment of his peers, often quoting his mom's favorite mantra, "Change starts with courage." Ellie's husband, Thomas, a supportive and loving partner, was her biggest cheerleader throughout the journey. As a journalist, he used his platform to write compelling articles about healthcare inequality, amplifying the stories that often went unheard. Together, they became a power couple advocating for justice and change. Meanwhile, at St. Matthew's, the hospital's leadership underwent a complete overhaul in its approach to training and policies. Ellie worked closely with the administration to implement diversity workshops, regular reviews of staff behavior, and anonymous feedback mechanisms for both patients and employees. The hospital also partnered with local organizations to address disparities in healthcare access for underserved communities. Following the incident, one of the immediate actions taken by Dr. Ellie Bennett and the hospital's leadership team was addressing the staffing issue. During a series of meetings with department heads and administrators, Ellie emphasized that being short-staffed should never be an excuse for poor treatment or neglect of patients. She knew that a lack of resources could exacerbate stress among staff, potentially leading to further incidents like the one with Dr. Hargrove. The plan wasn't just about filling positions, it was about creating a sustainable, positive workplace culture. Ellie believed that happy, well-supported staff would naturally provide better care to patients. As for Dr. Hargrove, his suspension turned into a deeper moment of reckoning. He completed the mandatory bias training and sought mentorship from Ellie herself. Though hesitant at first, Ellie agreed to take him under her wing, seeing it as an opportunity to turn a detractor into an ally. In one candid conversation, Hargrove admitted, "I don't know what's worse, that I acted the way I did or that I didn't even realize how wrong it was until I saw the consequences." Ellie looked at him thoughtfully. "What matters is what you do now. Acknowledging your mistakes is the first step, but it's your actions moving forward that will define who you are." Hargrove slowly earned back the trust of his colleagues, and his transformation became another chapter in the hospital's journey toward equity and respect. Dr. Hargrove, during his training and mentorship, participated in some of the recruitment efforts as part of his journey toward redemption. He volunteered to mentor new hires and students, using his own mistakes as a teaching tool to prevent similar issues in the future. One day, Brenda and Michael invited Ellie and her family over for dinner as a gesture of gratitude. Over the meal, Michael shared how the incident had inspired him to volunteer at a local community center, helping others navigate the healthcare system. Brenda, too, had found a sense of purpose, mentoring young women in her neighborhood. Ellie continued to fight for inclusivity and fairness, not just within her hospital but across the entire medical field. Her resilience and leadership became a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that change was possible, one brave action at a time. Within a year, the hospital saw a significant improvement in both staff morale and patient satisfaction. The increased staffing allowed the hospital to operate more efficiently, and the changes Ellie implemented became a model for other medical centers in the region. The incident with Dr. Hargrove had been a wake-up call, and under Ellie's leadership, the hospital turned it into an opportunity for lasting change. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.